My name is Clarence Holloway, most folks just call me Clint. I'm 78 years old, retired from the police force after nearly 4 decades of service. Last spring, I finally bought a modest house in Birchwater Reserve, a quiet, upscale neighborhood with tree-lined streets and a private pool out back, something I've dreamed of my whole life. I didn't move here for trouble, just peace, quiet swims, and coffee by the pool. But in this neighborhood, a man like me is seen as out of place. On Tuesday morning, I was trimming the hedges when the back gate creaked open. No knock, no warning. She walked in like she owned the place. Black blazer, pearl necklace, and a face that had memorized its own authority. "I'm Deborah Langston," she said, voice sharp as cut glass. "President of the Birchwater Reserve OA." I wiped my hands and nodded politely. "Can I help you?" She gave my pool a long look, then said, "This backyard used to be open to the community. We're just keeping with tradition." I kept my tone calm. "Well, ma'am, I'm the new owner now, and this is private property." She tilted her head, gave a tight smile. "Sure, but we've never had residents quite like you before, no offense." That was offense. "I expect the same respect as any neighbor," I said. She chuckled, turned to leave, and muttered just loud enough, "Rules are funny things, they tend to change when certain people move in." And just like that, I knew this wouldn't be the last time she crossed that gate. But I saw a towel left draped on a chair I hadn't used. Footprints near the pool after a long day out. Then one Saturday, I came home early and caught them 2 women in sun hats, lounging in my backyard like it was their weekend getaway. They froze when they saw me. I didn't raise my voice, just asked them to leave. One of them stammered, "Deborah said it was fine." I spoke to her that afternoon. "Oh," she said with mock surprise, "I thought you were out. They must have misunderstood, you know how people mix things up." But the next day, a post showed up in the Birchwater Community Facebook group. Concerned about unusual activity at a certain address, someone's always lurking in the backyard. No name, but it didn't need one. The implication was clear. Suddenly, I was the story. Suspicious behavior. Doesn't wave back. Never sees guests. Some neighbors stayed quiet. Others nodded a little too quickly when Deborah spoke. I wasn't just being ignored anymore, I was being rewritten. When words fail, evidence speaks. I'd learned that the hard way over 3 decades in uniform. So while the neighborhood whispers grew louder, I stayed quiet and started wiring up my property. Discreet cameras, tucked beneath the eaves and nestled in flower pots, recording everything. I didn't need drama, I needed the truth. And the truth didn't take long to show up. The footage was disturbing. Deborah Langston, in her signature black blazer and heels, slipping through my back gate without hesitation. Sometimes alone, sometimes with others. A few of them strolled the perimeter like they were assessing real estate. On 3 separate occasions, I watched her scatter white granules around my rose bushes, later confirmed to be herbicide when the blooms withered overnight. Another clip showed her dragging something sharp along the stucco wall facing the pool, the marks later painted over in HOA beige as if they'd never been there. A coward's signature. But the most blatant violation came one Thursday afternoon while I was at the clinic getting my blood pressure checked. I returned home to find folding chairs, empty wine glasses, and discarded napkins littering my yard. I checked the footage. 10 women had entered, led by Deborah, who cheerfully announced, "Let's hold our community meetup somewhere more open." They toasted near my pool, chatted about HOA dues and landscaping guidelines, and laughed like the place belonged to them. It didn't. It belonged to me. That night, I filed a report. 2 officers came. I recognized the younger one, Officer Blake Langston. The name didn't surprise me. We stood under the glow of my porch light as I handed them a USB of the recordings. Blake glanced at the drive, then back at me. "We'll log it and follow up," he said too quickly. His partner shifted awkwardly. "We'll note the incident, Mr. Holloway." That was it. No promises, no action. I could feel it in the silence between their words. Deborah's influence reached further than just HOA meetings. They weren't going to do a damn thing. That night, as the crickets chirped and my roses sagged in the dark, I sat at the edge of the pool and thought about all the years I wore a badge. All the times I'd told people to trust the system. All the times they had looked at me with doubt, and now, I finally understood. Sometimes, the system doesn't ignore you because it's broken. It ignores you because someone like you isn't supposed to speak. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because if the law wouldn't speak for me, the truth would, and I had it frame by frame. I first noticed it on a Wednesday morning, the smell. The water in my pool looked the same under the Georgia sun, glinting and calm. But as I walked past with my coffee, I caught a sharp chemical scent, not chlorine, something harsher. I crouched down and dipped my hand in. The water felt slick, unnatural, like it had been tampered with. I leaned in and inhaled again. Industrial cleanser, the kind used in maintenance yards, not in backyard pools. Someone had poisoned the water. Not to kill me, no. Nothing that bold. This was quieter, a calculated nuisance, a warning. It wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. Deborah Langston had grown more emboldened by the week. Her trespasses more frequent, her comments sharper. I'd heard from Mrs. Rodriguez that Deborah was telling neighbors I was unstable. That I was refusing to cooperate with community expectations, that the pool might be better off repurposed for shared use, like it was a public fountain. But this was no longer just a rumor or a visit, this was sabotage. And something inside me shifted. I didn't shout, I didn't call the police, I simply stood beside the clouded water and thought. About all the times I stayed silent. All the times I took the high road, turned the other cheek. And then I remembered something, a case back in 1983, a chemical leak in a motel pool that turned a dozen guests bright blue. It was harmless, embarrassing, and completely avoidable. If they'd followed the rules. We'd traced the incident to a pool technician who'd used a leak detection dye, a special formula that reacted only when exposed to compounds in certain cosmetics, especially high-end sunscreen and tanning oils. I remember laughing with my partner at the time, watching those guests walk out looking like cartoon aliens. Now here I was, 4 decades later, and that old case became the seed of an idea. What if the next time Deborah broke into my yard, she left with something she couldn't explain away, something visible, something vivid? I spent the next 2 days doing quiet research. The dye was still sold, mostly to professionals. Completely safe, non-toxic, invisible in water until it met the right chemical combination. Then it bloomed across the skin in a brilliant, temporary hue. I ordered a small batch online, expedited shipping. When the package arrived, I tested it in a bucket behind the shed, a few drops of dye, a dollop of expensive sunscreen I'd found smeared on one of my patio chairs. The result was glorious, a deep emerald green stain that took 3 days to fade from my arm. Harmless, legal, but unforgettable. I spent the following evening prepping the pool, calculating just the right dosage. I double-checked the filtration system to ensure it wouldn't spread too far. I repositioned the cameras for maximum coverage, one by the garden gnome, another hidden in the birdhouse, and one inside the back window. Then I waited. Not for long. Because if I knew anything about people like Deborah Langston, it was this: when they think they've won, they always come back for more. And this time, they'd walk straight into the trap. Saturday arrived with the kind of stillness only a southern summer can offer, warm, humid, and quiet enough that you could hear the faint whir of distant lawnmowers and the soft clink of wind chimes 3 houses over. The morning sun had barely crested the tops of the birch trees when I carried my coffee to the front porch and made a deliberate show of locking the door behind me. I wanted Deborah Langston to see me leave. And she did. I spotted her silhouette through the gap in her curtains. Same as always, watching, calculating, a queen surveying her court. I gave a subtle wave. She didn't return it. I climbed into my truck, turned the engine, and rolled slowly down the street. But instead of heading out for errands, I looped around the block and parked in the alley 2 houses over. From there, I slipped through my side gate, quiet as a breeze, and settled into the second-floor study with my laptop, coffee, and a clear line of sight to the pool. The trap was set. It didn't take long. By noon, the back gate clicked open. Deborah entered first, dressed like she was headed to a five-star resort. Wide-brimmed sun hat, black wrap dress, and heels she'd regret in 5 minutes. Behind her came 6 other women, all HOA members, all part of her inner circle. They laughed as they stepped into the yard, carrying wine bottles, tote bags, and Bluetooth speakers like it was their own private retreat. "This is what community looks like," Deborah announced, her voice bright and falsely sweet. "Just neighbors gathering for a little unity." Unity. What a word to use when trespassing. I sipped my coffee and said nothing, watching from behind the blinds as they spread towels across my chairs, turned on soft jazz, and popped open the champagne. 10 minutes in, they were swimming. Deborah was the first to slide into the pool, gliding through the water with the confidence of a woman who'd spent her life unchallenged. Her friends followed, slathering themselves with expensive sunscreen, the kind I'd specifically tested for, thick with titanium dioxide, essential oils, and arrogance. At first, everything seemed normal. They laughed, they floated, they clinked their glasses together and toasted to keeping the neighborhood elegant. Then it began. The first scream came from Susan, the one with the loudest jewelry and the quietest brain. Wait, what's happening to my skin?" Everyone turned. On her forearm, just beneath the surface of the water, a murky green hue had begun to spread, faint at first, like a bruise, then brighter, bolder. Another voice followed. "Oh my God, it's on me too." They scrambled toward the edge of the pool, splashing wildly. One woman, knee-deep on the steps, looked down and let out a guttural gasp. Her legs were a deep, unmistakable emerald, like she'd been dipped in a vat of food coloring. Deborah was still floating, eyes closed, when someone shouted, "Deb, you're glowing." Her eyes snapped open. She stared at her hands, her pale, manicured fingers now glowing green beneath the water. "What in the—" she gasped, slapping the water, as if she could beat the color off her skin. Panic set in like wildfire. One by one, they bolted out of the pool, dripping, shrieking, trying to scrub the dye off with towels and bottled water, but the stain had set. Their skin, arms, necks, even faces was blotched with streaks of deep green, a cosmetic disaster no concealer could fix. "Do something," someone screamed. "What is this? Is it toxic?" Deborah was frozen, trembling, jaw clenched. Then she saw it. The red light blinking from the birdhouse camera aimed directly at them. Her face twisted into something I hadn't seen before. Panic. Real, unfiltered panic. "This was a setup," she hissed. "He did this." The women turned to look around the yard, suddenly aware that their unauthorized pool party had an audience. They scrambled for their belongings, dropping wine glasses and makeup bags in their haste. I watched them from my seat upstairs, silent, still. Not out of cruelty. Out of principle. Because this wasn't just about a pool. This was about every door I'd seen closed in my face. Every whispered accusation, every assumption that I didn't belong here, or anywhere. This was the mirror being held up. And finally, they couldn't look away. The last to leave was Deborah, still wet, still green. She paused at the gate, turned back, and looked toward the house. I didn't move. Didn't blink. Just sat there, sipping my now cold coffee. She left without a word. Within hours, the footage was circulating. I didn't post it, didn't need to. The neighborhood grapevine handled that for me. By sunset, the video, complete with multiple camera angles and jazz soundtrack, had been forwarded to half the community. The subject line? "OA goes green." I got a call from Terry Walker, the HOA vice president, that evening. He didn't ask me anything. Just laughed and said, "You got 'em good, Clint, real good." The next morning, Deborah didn't show her face, but the neighborhood was alive with whispers. Lawn chairs turned toward my house, windows lifted just enough to peek through blinds. The jokes started immediately. Kids walked past wearing green armbands. Someone chalked "pool rules, ask first" on the sidewalk. And for the first time since I moved in, people started knocking on my door, not with complaints, but with introductions. Empanadas from Mrs. Rodriguez. Fresh peach pie from the Johnsons. a six-pack and a handshake from Tom next door. All of it said the same thing. We saw what happened, and we're not with her. I never said a word about the die, never confirmed, never denied, just smiled when asked, and offered a fresh glass of lemonade. Let them wonder. Because sometimes, justice doesn't shout. It stains. And stains have a way of sticking long after the water runs clear. By Sunday morning, the video had taken on a life of its own. It started small, shared between a few neighbors, passed around in private chats with laughing emojis and vague subject lines like, "You won't believe this." But by noon, someone had uploaded it to YouTube under the title, "HOA broke and karma painted them green." And from there, it spread like wildfire. Clips from the multiple camera angles showed everything in high definition. The unauthorized entry, the champagne toasts, the slow dawning horror as skin turned bright emerald in the midday sun. The jazz soundtrack only made it more absurd and more entertaining. One commenter dubbed it, "the most satisfying HOA takedown in internet history." Within 24 hours, the video had over 1.3 million views. By Monday, local news stations had picked it up. One anchor, barely holding back laughter, read aloud the headline, "Local HOA pool party ends in green disaster, homeowner not amused." They showed stills of Deborah Langston's expression at the moment she discovered the camera. Another news segment included expert commentary on the legality of trespassing and the use of non-toxic dyes, all confirming that nothing illegal had been done by the homeowner. That homeowner being me. I didn't give interviews. I didn't need to. The footage spoke louder than I ever could. But what I didn't expect, what moved me most, was what came next. People started coming forward. Mrs. Rodriguez, the kind neighbor across the street who'd once left a plate of cookies on my doorstep, wrote a post on the community forum. She described how Deborah had reported her Christmas decorations 2 years earlier for being too ethnic. Another neighbor shared how the HOA once fined them for painting their front door a shade that wasn't in harmony with the traditional aesthetic, despite having prior approval. A single father, whose teenage son had set up a lemonade stand, commented, "She called the HOA and said it violated health codes. My boy cried the whole afternoon." The forum lit up. Stories poured in, each one a piece of the puzzle that revealed just how far the HOA, and Deborah specifically, had gone in their crusade to preserve community standards. Except now, the community was realizing those standards only applied to certain people. People who looked a certain way, lived a certain way. People who weren't like me. It was more than just schadenfreude. It was a reckoning. The HOA called an emergency meeting. For the first time, it wasn't held in the clubhouse, but over Zoom, likely to avoid cameras. But it didn't help. By the end of the call, 3 board members had officially resigned. The HOA treasurer issued a statement distancing herself from Deborah's unauthorized actions. And Deborah Langston? She didn't speak at all. That evening, her real estate agency issued a formal press release. Effective immediately, Ms. Langston is no longer affiliated with our firm. We believe in respect, equity, and personal responsibility, values not reflected in recent events. But the internet wasn't done with her. Sometime after midnight, Deborah posted a video to her Facebook page. She was seated in her backyard, makeup-free, face still faintly tinted green. Her voice was shaky, her expression forced. Behind her, wind rustled through the hedges she used to lecture neighbors about trimming properly. "I want to offer a sincere apology," she began. "To the homeowner, to the community, to those who were hurt or offended." It was the kind of apology built on pressure, not remorse. She blamed miscommunication, a breakdown of tradition, and even the difficult transition of new ownership. Never once did she say my name. Never once did she say what really happened. That she trespassed. That she lied. That she got caught. The comments weren't kind. Hundreds flooded in within the hour. Should have asked first. Community doesn't mean dictatorship. Looks like karma finally installed a pool gate. Someone posted a gif of the Wicked Witch of the West melting. Another made t-shirts. Ask before you swim. Proceeds went to a local community center. Deborah disabled comments by morning. But it was too late. Her name was trending not for her listings or neighborhood charm, but for becoming the face of entitled overreach. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything. I just cleaned the pool. Skimmed the leaves. And when Tom from 2 doors down dropped by with a cooler full of sweet tea and a grin on his face, I welcomed him in like an old friend. "Clint," he said, looking around. "You've changed this neighborhood more in a week than she did in 10 years. I shrugged. "Didn't mean to." He chuckled. "That's the best part. You didn't have to yell. You just turned on the cameras and let the truth speak for itself." Later that day, I got a letter in the mail, not from a lawyer, not from the HOA. It was handwritten, signed only, the Johnson family. Inside was a note. "Thank you for standing your ground. You reminded all of us what it means to belong and what happens when we let fear silence us." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the kitchen drawer. Some things don't need to be framed to be remembered. The green might fade from Deborah's skin, but the stain she left behind? That was permanent. And finally, everyone could see it. 1 year later, the neighborhood felt different. The air was lighter somehow. The silence that once hung heavy around my house had been replaced by something better: laughter, real laughter, children's voices echoing across the water, neighbors greeting each other by name instead of avoiding eye contact behind drawn blinds. And the pool? It had become something more than a place to cool off. It had become a symbol. Every Saturday afternoon, families gathered around it. Parents brought folding chairs and coolers. Kids brought floaties and popsicles. Sometimes, a speaker played soft blues or old Motown. Sometimes, it was just the sound of splashes and stories being shared. All of it with permission. All of it with respect. No one asked to own the space. No one assumed it was theirs. They asked first, and that was enough. Deborah Langston was long gone. The house she'd once lorded over with unspoken rules and loud judgment had been sold quietly to a retired couple from out of state. No fanfare, no farewell. Just a moving truck one Tuesday morning and a for sale sign that no one mourned. I heard she moved to a smaller suburb 2 counties over. Some whispered she tried to join another HOA. Others said she lived in an apartment now, no lawn to supervise, no pool to patrol. I never checked. Her name faded from conversations, but not from memory. Just beside the pool gate, mounted to the wooden fence, was a small bronze plaque, simple, unadorned. "Respect is the deepest water." No one vandalized it, no one laughed at it, everyone understood it. It wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about the lesson. One evening, I was invited to speak at the Birchwater Community Forum, the first public meeting focused on equity and inclusion in the neighborhood's history. They held it in the renovated clubhouse, newly painted, with folding chairs lined up under warm overhead lights. People sat shoulder to shoulder, black, white, Latino, Asian, old and young, all facing the podium where I stood with a microphone in hand. I looked out at the crowd. Some of them I knew well, some were new, some had been silent that whole year ago when I was called a trespasser in my own yard. Now they waited. I cleared my throat, leaned slightly into the mic and said, "Never judge a man by the color of his skin, or the chair he's sitting in." The room held still for a moment. Then came the applause. Not thunderous, not performative, just steady, genuine. That was enough. Afterward, they served sweet tea and peach cobbler. The Johnson kids ran up to show me their drawings. Mrs. Rodriguez brought another tray of empanadas. And as the sun dipped below the trees, I made my way back to my yard, back to where it all began. The pool shimmered, calm and untroubled. I sat at its edge with my old fishing rod, the same one I used to take out on Sundays back when the world felt heavier. I wasn't fishing, really. There were no fish to catch. It was just something to do with my hands as I watched the neighborhood live again. A little girl in braids giggled as she chased a rubber duck. Her brother cannonballed off the edge, earning mock scolding from his mother. Laughter rose and fell like waves, and for the first time in years, I felt not just safe but home. Not because they finally accepted me, but because I never changed to earn it. Justice, real justice, doesn't come from punishment. It comes from presence. From refusing to be erased. From staying still in the face of noise, and letting truth echo louder than any shout. So I sat there, rod in hand, sun on my shoulders, the sound of joy all around me. The cameras still watched, but these days, they caught different things: birthday parties, shared meals, shy smiles turning into friendships. And every now and then, someone new would walk by, pause at the plaque, and ask me what it meant. I'd point at the pool, at the families gathered there, and say, exactly what you see. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like a man and his fishing rod. And sometimes, it sounds like children laughing where silence once ruled. The water was still. The community wasn't perfect. But it was healing one splash at a time.